Welcome to the MacJury. This is the home of truth, justice, and the Macintosh way. I'm Chuck Joyner, and folks, this time we're here to pass judgment on Apple's announcements. As of, well, today when we're recording this, we got everybody to rush back to wherever they were and join us. So let's go around the room and find out who all is with us this time. First up, Ms. Tonya Engst. Tonya, it's great to have you. Thanks. I know it's been a busy day for you.
Thanks, Chuck. It's nice to be here. Let's see. I am senior editor and co-founder of the Tidbits website. We cover all things Apple, so obviously today was a big day for us.
Terrific, terrific. Next up, Ms. Omaha Sternberg, our game expert. Omaha, it's great to have you.
Thanks, Chuck. It's great to be back. And I am the head editor and founder of iGame Radio, and we cover gaming on the Mac and iOS devices. And so, obviously, with all of the big announcements for the iMac, MacBook Pro, and the iPad Mini, this is a big day. Big day for Mac gamers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so that's the ladies. Now we go to the gentlemen. First up, for a business perspective, Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark, it's great to have you.
Hello, Chuck. It's good to be back. It seems I'm a frequent guest on the show, and most times I think I'm here just for my charm and good looks. But today, actually, products and targeting markets and developing and extending product lines is something I'm quite involved in for over 20 years, and recently, for 3 or 4 different startup clients. So it was very interesting to watch the event today.
Absolutely, but especially with a lot of the announcements we didn't expect. And last but not least, our secret weapon in this MacJury coverage, on site, Mr. Dave Hamilton, who actually got to touch some of these things. Dave, thank you for breaking away and coming and joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. I thought we could make the timing and all that work out. Yep, I'm Dave Hamilton from the Mac Observer and our Mac Geek podcast, of course.
Terrific, terrific. Guys, there's so much here to talk about, but I want to start with one thing that let's not overlook, is that Apple actually streamed this out. If you had the right Apple products, you could actually watch it. You had to have an Apple TV or Safari, I believe. I did. I had a little bit of stuttering on the on my Mac over a Wi-Fi connection, but it certainly was more than watchable, so I really liked it. Tonya, I think you said you were able to watch it on a big screen TV using your Apple TV?
That's right. Right on the Apple TV. We just pushed the menu button on the Apple TV, and it just sort of came right up. And it was very enjoyable. Adam and I both, we both work at home, so we just went over to the TV room and sat on the couches with laptops and lunch and watched the whole thing. It stuttered just a little bit, but it was sort of completely normal for internet streaming. And it was very enjoyable to get the big screen TV approach.
Yeah, this was an interesting idea. Mark, how did you watch it?
I watched it streamed to an iMac.
Okay, Omaha?
Well, I was thinking about watching it through my Apple TV because I also work at home, but I wanted to actually sit in my office with all of my equipment and be tweeting and things like that regarding all the events, and I had all of my information on my Power Mac. And my Power Mac is hooked up through Ethernet, so I didn't think it was a problem. But it actually stuttered a lot more often than maybe for some of the rest. I'm not really sure because I actually have a pretty high-powered internet connection, and I had to be, especially at some points in time, I had to be restarting the connection a lot, which was pretty annoying. But it always seemed to happen when Tim Cook or Phil was talking about stuff that wasn't really all that interesting to me. So I didn't miss out on anything I didn't need to.
Intelligent networking.
Yes, exactly.
Dave, how about you?
It only stuttered twice for me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Dave, the theater was gorgeous, but the thing that got me was just the quality of the picture. I mean, it was amazing, and it was obviously, it wasn't just a couple cameras. It was a real multi-camera shoot. It looked fantastic. Yeah, they had cameras all over the place. I mean, there were cameras there anyway because all the the news crews and everything bring in their cameras. But it was clear that they were running a full spread on this one. And did they make any comments about that either before they started streaming or after, that it was being streamed, or was it just part of the background?
No, in fact, I would have expected to see those typical signs that you see that, say if you're part of the witness protection program, you should probably leave now. We're going to, but there were none of those. So I was glad to see that they didn't show my face. We're not showing my face here either, right, Chuck?
for the right price day.
Capitalism in action.
Well, guys, I guess, I feel like this was supposed to be an iPad mini event, but it felt like there were so many things that came out that are worth talking about, but that's the big one. So let's touch on the iPad mini. And Dave, I'll go back to you first. What was the reaction in the room to the mini and obviously to the price?
There was, the mini itself got, a good round of applause. Everybody seemed happy. The price, I think there had been a lot of speculation that the price would be lower than it came out to be. A lot of hope, perhaps, that the price would be lower than it came out to be. So that was a little, there was actually some applause at the price, but more than I expected. But some of the conversation afterwards was, well, but I still think, personally, I think it's going to do gangbusters at Christmas.
Yeah. Tonya, I was surprised at the reaction of the journalists, or I guess they're supposed to be journalists in the room, or that's what we were led to believe were the primary audience. And yet there seemed to be an awful lot of applause for an awful lot of things from all these staid people.
Yeah, I mean, it was a typical Apple event. There were a lot of adjectives going on. Things were fabulous, things were amazing, things were wonderful, the best ever, the fastest. And so, it does create the event itself does create a certain energy. Sitting back at home, it was maybe a little easier to see this was expected. This is an evolutionary change. Applause to Apple certainly for keeping things going and releasing new products that improve and expand their line. But this was not some really surprising, amazing turn of the technology hand. I didn't think, and I was interested that you said that to me or asked that question of me, Chuck, because just before I got on here, I was kind of complaining to Adam. I had just written an article for Tidbits about the new iPads, and I was complaining that this is actually journalism that I'm doing, so I'm not going to throw in a lot of fabulous adjectives because it really does not merit a fabulous adjective from a journalism standpoint. And I was writing for a technical enough audience that I couldn't just kind of gloss over and wave my hands over things. Like I couldn't just say, oh, the Wi-Fi is twice as fast. I had to find out why. So it got a little bit more detailed to read. And so I was kind of complaining about that. And yeah, so I think from a journalist perspective, well, I mean, everyone applauds at an Apple event. Maybe it's just polite, but it did seem maybe a little overblown.
It felt overblown in the room. There were a lot of people that weren't taking. There were a lot of people just watching, and more so than I would say even at the last one. For the iPhone 5, and I don't know. If that kind of theater changes the vibe of people too, right? I mean, this is that was a beautiful theater, and it so I don't know, but it seemed weird. In fact, there were some people sitting around us that I could tell under their breath were sort of mocking those of us that were there taking notes and doing what we were doing, and I could tell they thought, wow, you're here, you should just watch and enjoy this. And trust me, I would have loved nothing more than to just sit and watch and enjoy it, but that's not why I'm there. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard work to cover one of those, especially. It's probably easier at home. We're taking screenshots of the slides we're taking photos of the slides as they go by, and we're chatting and twittering, and we can roll it back and rewatch it if we need to, and all this stuff. And you don't have as much technology at hand.
No, you don't. Yeah.
Mark, I saw you tweet about the stock price. And I'm kind of curious to get your reaction. Was this something you expected to see it drop, since there was a bit of hype and a bit of a rebound yesterday on Apple stock price? And I don't know.
Yes, I did. I mean, it's the old. Sorry, we're talking over each other due to the delay and latency in Skype. I was expecting it to go down. I was frankly a little surprised at the magnitude of the drop. About $20. That gives back, I think, the recent days' gains. But if you look, over the past year, there's been precedent for this. When the iPhone 4 came out, then 4S, there were drops. When the iPad 3 came out, again, there was a little bit of critical reaction. I think it's a mixture of several factors. Number one, I imagine for a lot of the journalists covering it, Steve Jobs is a tough act to beat, and in the past couple of years, he's had a lot of really new and revolutionary products, and I think that's created a certain addiction that people may have, and instead they're back into more of their sort of continuous incremental work and improve and use the latest technology, make products continually better, et cetera, et cetera. That I think doesn't feed that craving. And whether it's the journalists or a lot of the traders on the street, they're looking for that. I think maybe irrationally that, as Dave was saying, that there was a lot of commentary and people were thinking, oh, it's a $299 or maybe $249. And recently, I think people started smoking something. When thinking about Apple, thinking, oh, they could make this a $199 product. So I think all of those factors that came in, and sort of my sense is, Apple is on sale temporarily. We'll have to see what happens Thursday with the earnings report, because it may have bottomed out now, and if not, I think if you take a long-term perspective instead of trying to guess what's the stock going to be in 10 days, then I think it's very attractive at this level.
Interesting. Omaha, you started the conversation and introduced yourself as part of your introduction. Let me try that again. That this is a big day for gamers. Is the iPad Mini, the best gaming machine out there going?
No, I don't think so. I was actually referring more to the iMac that was introduced, actually, to tell you the truth. The iPad Mini, it's going to be interesting how gamers view it. There's a couple of different aspects that are going on here. One of them is that you have a lot of people who use the iPod Touch for gaming. In fact, right in the middle of this Apple event, Google releases this big study that says 51% of people who use their tablets use it for gaming. It's like the third most popular thing that they use their tablets for. So you have this smaller tablet that's coming out that is lighter, easier to move around with. I mean, the Apple iPad 3, the iPad 2, the original iPad, all of them are there. I mean, I have the original iPad. It's nice to carry around, but when you're sitting there trying to game, you have to, in some way, shape, or form, prop it up. You have to have it on your legs or whatever in order to be able to do a proper amount of gaming. And having something that's much lighter, much easier to have in your hand in order to be able to game, but has better screen real estate than an iPod Touch, is going to be very appealing to people. The price tag, on the other hand, is a bit high. With a lot of the other 7-incher tablets out there, I'm not exactly sure that a lot of gamers are going to look at that and say, well, there's a lot of games out there, whether it be for Android-based or iOS-based. Why would I pay $329 for this iPad Mini when I can get a 7-inch tablet over here that's a Nexus or a Samsung for a whole lot less and still get a bunch of games on it to play? So that's the question a lot of gamers are going to be asking. Now, if they really like iOS and they really want to stick with Apple products because they're the highest quality out there, they're going to start looking and saying, it's still $329. Is the screen real estate really that important in comparison to having an iPod Touch, which will also allow me to do a whole bunch of, the things that I'm traditionally thinking an iPod Touch is there for? And that's the question a lot of gamers are going to be asking back and forth regarding whether to get an iPad Mini or not. That's
what about performance? What about performance? I mean, they made a big deal of talking about the new A6X chip, and in I think it was the iPad 3 announcement earlier this year when they were talking about their A5. Phil Schiller presented a chart showing how much faster it was versus the Tegra chip that is
Right.
used in the Google Nexus tablet. So, I'm just curious on, in addition to price point, how important is performance to this segment of the gaming market?
Well, if you take a look at the majority of the games that are out there, it doesn't matter which particular performance chip that you've got, whether it's the Nexus or whether it's the Asus out there. They're both going to perform just as well on those particular tablets. The higher end games that are going to be running on those tablets, there's really not nearly so many of those particular games, and a larger proportion of the people who are playing on those tablets are probably not going to be running for those particular games. Which doesn't mean that they're not going to play them or not. It does mean that even with a higher performance tablet, most of even the higher end games that you're getting through the App Store, most of them are running fairly well on the iPad 3. They run on the iPad 2, not so much. Obviously most of them are not running on the iPad. So we're running against the screen real estate aspect. If they want those types of games, most of them want a larger screen. And they're not going to be as interested in an iPad mini as they are going to be in the iPad, the third generation, or rather the fourth generation that was just announced. And they're going to think to themselves, do I want to buy an iPad mini, or do I want to wait for the iPad fourth generation that's going to come out with a larger screen real estate, because my iPad third gen will actually run all those games right now with a larger screen real estate for me to play on. I've been playing some games that are so detailed that if you put it on a slightly smaller screen, even the 7.9-inch iPad mini, it's still too small to really be able to play well and feel like you're getting a lot of fun out of it, rather than feeling like you're having to work in order to be able to see what you're doing. So screen real estate makes a big difference, especially since the average gamer is about 35, which means half your gamers are older than 35. And that really makes a big difference.
Tonya, I wanted to make sure you got here because, of course, this seems to be Apple's answer, at least in theory, to some of the ebook readers. It can do a lot more, but we have now a new version of iBooks, which would seem to fit real well with the iPad mini. Any particular reactions or thoughts as an ebook publisher to what this does to you or to the ebook market?
Well, we've already have Kindles and Nooks and all kinds of non-Apple devices that work very well as ebook readers and are kind of about this size. And I think the right size is going to be a very personal decision for different people. Some people, budget is no concern. Some people, the best screen possible is a big concern. Some people, they just want the cheapest thing they can possibly get so they can load a lot of books on it and not feel bad if it gets lost or stolen. Some people really care about their font options. Some people really don't care. So I am going to be very curious to see sort of how this mini stacks up. Will people prefer it because it's more portable, or will they think it's sort of stupid because it's smaller? I think people will have all kinds of opinions, and it will end up being very personal. And even what you think might be true now might not be true in 2 years after you try a device of one size or another and discover its pros and cons. As an ebook publisher, because we're already dealing with all these different devices with their different sizes, it's just sort of one more device in the pile. The EPUB format, which is becoming increasingly popular, one of the key characteristics of it is that when you get the book onto your device, whether it's an iPhone, a new iPad mini, another kind of iPad, or some other device entirely, it automatically creates pages for you or screens that fit your particular screen. The software and the format handle that. So as a publisher, all you have to do is kind of cooperate with the format. It's much like making a big, huge web page. You let the web browser, when you make a web page, decide all this stuff for you. It also makes it, it's just one more reason why it's harder for publishers to create ebooks in that PDF format that used to be pretty much the only game in town. And the PDF format is one where you decide what the page size will be it 8.5 by 11 or 3 by 4, whatever it's going to be, and then you create specific pages for those different sizes. That scheme doesn't really work out very well because many of your customers will always be on the wrong size page. I thought by far the most interesting thing about Apple's entire collection of announcements today was a very small thing they said about iBooks Author. There's a new version of iBooks Author that's out, and it brings some new features to the books that are created in iBooks Author, and they're not features that I think most people would take too much note of. There's something about better math equations. That's probably good. But what I noticed was you were going to be able, as a publisher, to update your book. You were going to be able to somehow tell Apple, here's a new version of the book. Apple was going to stick that in the iBook store, and somehow it sounded like it was going to end up on the devices of all the people who had already bought the book. Now, that's something that Tidbits has been doing with our Take Control ebook series since the beginning, as best we can as a very tiny company. Apple obviously has huge resources and servers at their disposal, but it sounds like they've kind of gotten the idea that just because a book is published and done as like a 1.0 version or a first edition, that doesn't mean that the project is over. It just means there's another version or edition coming, and publishers really want to be able to communicate to existing customers about those new versions. So I'll be watching that feature with great interest. That's only for ebooks created with Apple's iBooks Author software in the iBooks Author format, and those books may only be sold, if they're to be sold, through the iBook store. So it's a pretty limited niche, but very interesting to watch.
Dave, at the end of the day, the new iPad mini is an iPad. And the thing that struck me the most, and that doesn't sound terribly profound, but the screen resolution is the same, which in my mind means that all the apps that we have now will run on this thing exactly the way they run on the bigger iPad. No developer tweaks necessary or required as far as I can tell. So this thing hits the market and goes into the Kindle Fire area and all with the full force of the App Store.
That's right. Yeah, and there was, it's true, according to Apple, every app that is out there will run on this thing day one because it's 1024 by 768. Now, obviously, it's smaller. But that actually gives it, I wouldn't call it a Retina display, but it's Retina-ish. If you're used to, and by that I mean, if you're used to the non-Retina iPads, and then you move to this thing at the same resolution, a little smaller, it means the dot pitch is that much tighter. And it really has a very clear picture on it. The text on it was very crisp. In the same way, sort of the same way that I felt when I first used a Retina iPad versus a regular iPad. It's like, oh wow, this is nicer to read on than its predecessor, and that's definitely true. If you're coming from a non-Retina iPad, this is easy to read, and if you've looked at pictures of it, the bezel, especially on the sides, if you're holding it in portrait mode on the sides, is very thin. It's not like the iPad that we know, where there's a very, very thick bezel all the way around it. This is very thin, and it fits nicely in the hand, and has that kind of form factor that everybody has wanted, or not everybody, but many people have asked for in the iPad. That I could hold it in my hand. I tweeted some pictures of it in my hand. I have fairly large hands. But so some people are not going to be able to hold it in their hand. But it was very comfortable to hold. It's light, and the back is that same anodized aluminum that we have on the new iPod Touch, and so I like the way that feels in the hand. It's got a good grip on it. It doesn't feel slippery. It's not glass like the old iPhones were or anything like that. So yeah, no, it's good stuff.
Dave, how about the camera? Again, you played with it. I don't know if you had a chance to take any pictures with it. Is it adequate? Is it just sort of a throwaway, or do you think it actually is a real feature that people would gravitate to this machine for?
Honestly, I'm forgetting the specs now. It was like drinking from a fire hose this morning at the thing. So you probably are more in tune with the specs than I am, even though I was writing them down. But yeah,
I think they said
I
it
did
was
take
5 megapixel.
Yeah.
okay, that
5
sounds
megapixel.
that sounds right. Okay, yeah, that was going to be my guess.
And then the
we saw-
front-facing camera has the HD. It's no longer VGA.
That's right. It's HD now. Yeah, the front, right, the front one. Yeah, you know, is it going to be? I bet people will take tons of pictures with it because I think it's the kind of device that people are going to carry around with them all the time. And as has been proven, it almost doesn't matter what the quality of the camera is. I mean, it does to an extent, but really it's in your pocket. And so people are going to take pictures with it even if it's crummy. And it's probably not that crummy.
Okay, so let's have a quick round around the table. Who plans to buy one for actual use, not just for a review unit? Omaha?
I'm kind of on the
Hesitation.
shelf. I need to get a new iPad. And up until the iPad mini was announced, I was going to go get myself a 3rd generation iPad. Now I'm trying to think to myself, well, do I take a look at the iPad mini or do I go ahead at 3rd generation or do I wait for the 4th gen? The screen real estate is really the issue for me. I'm probably going to take a look at the iPad mini, but chances are I'm probably going to go with the 3rd or 4th generation iPad, depending on how long it takes for the 4th gen to actually come out. I don't remember whether they announced when the 4th generation is planning on coming out or not. But yeah, the screen real estate will be the deciding factor for me, whether the iPad mini screen real estate is really big enough or not.
Tonya?
Well, just randomly, just by chance, on my desk right now, I have this thing, MacBook Air, this thing, I've got some iPad, I've got 2 or 3 other iPads within 10 feet of here. The last thing I actually need for personal use is another, thing like this. I've got, more of them than I actually have time to maintain at this point. It's kind of silly. Even with aggressively passing them down to family members, there's just a lot. And part of why I have so many is because when I need to write an article for Tidbits or update, I have a book, Take Control of Your iPad, which urgently needs an update. But I like to be able to pull out all the old hardware and test things and remind myself how it works, and that's all great, but I really don't need more things. So it seems like with the iPad mini that there's really no reason to have it because I don't need one more personally, and it seems like there won't really be anything to test that I couldn't get in some other way. It seems like the iPad 4, the 4th generation iPad will have a lot of similar stuff in terms of like how its cellular radio works and all that. So I might be able to get away with not buying it. And I don't mean that as not recommending it for other people. It looks very nice. It's just, how many of these things can you have?
I don't know. Maybe you may be the one to find out. Mark, how about you?
Would I buy the iPad mini? Probably not. I upgraded to the iPad Retina in March. So for my own personal use, don't see buying it. Maybe some of the other things today are tempting. However, we might look at buying it as a gift come holiday season.
A gift for who?
Oh, I better not say. A family member.
I see. Dave, how about you? Is this going to be on the shopping list, Christmas or not?
I don't think I will buy one for my own personal use, but I think my wife is a perfect candidate for this. She's still using an iPad 1 because she's actually she's deferred on some hand-me-downs and the kids have taken, and she really wants the smaller form factor because she carries her iPad out with her all the time. So it makes this device is exactly what she wanted. So yeah, I think our anniversary is tomorrow. If the thing was actually available, I think I'd be on the hook for that. But thank goodness we're not. So it's not.
Hey, happy anniversary!
Thanks.
Get on that plane and get home.
That's the idea.
Well, guys, I leave the iPad Mini, and let's pass over the iPad 4. And I say that just because there were some enhancements, some pretty impressive enhancements, but this was only a few months old. I mean, my iPad 3 only feels a few months old. And Dave, I want to go back to you because you were there. Any reaction in the crowd? I mean, we were all watching Twitter, but any reaction there? Is this too quick an update, no matter how good an update it might be?
Well, you know, I kind of feel like we're back in the '90s when you know you had to buy a computer and then not look at the price or the specs of anything for a year. No, really, right? I mean, that's how it was back then. You had to decide, today is the day that I need to buy a computer. I like that computer, and I like the price that I'm going to get for it today. And you pay a lot of attention at that point in time, and then as soon as you spend your money and you get it home, you stop looking for a year because there will be something better. Now, I didn't expect this, certainly not with the type of upgrade that we saw. But you know, it makes sense for Apple to get their refresh cycle. If they are going to stay on an annual refresh cycle, it makes sense to have it come up before Christmas as opposed to after Christmas. I think in some ways that has hurt them in the past, but maybe not. Maybe they just update when they feel like updating because it's their company and they can do what they want.
I think it was more of a competitive threat. You know, I think clearly they probably turned it in order to put the Lightning connector on it, and then at the same time it seems that they have this A6X processor, so just spin that and bump the performance, and I think to some extent they may. If you look at some of the criticism around June and things earlier this year, and sliding into September, their cycle may be becoming a little too predictable. So I think they may want to get a certain element of randomness back into it, so that people continue to buy and not expect, oh well, I'm not going to buy for 3 months because in 3 months and 2 weeks they're going to announce something new.
Right.
Point well taken. Do you think the Lightning connector was the big thing?
I think it could be
to streamline it.
Yeah, I think it could be. They've clearly they're invested in this Lightning connector and they want to move everything to it. So to have what would potentially be their flagship tablet anyway, languishing in that regard for some predetermined date doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think you're right, Mark. I think that's probably the thing that made them decide, what can we do with this so that we can roll something new out and just get away from the 30-pin connector as fast as possible.
Tonya, you mentioned you wrote the article about the Wi-Fi being faster. Is that a reality? The Wi-Fi really is faster?
Well, I haven't tested it personally, but Apple did say twice during the announcement once for each iPad that the Wi-Fi was twice as fast. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I went and looked at the specs up on the Apple website, and 802.11a/b/blah, blah, blah. And I didn't see anything different. And so I asked my colleague Glenn Fleischman, who writes a lot about Wi-Fi, I said, what's different? And he wrote back this whole thing that even though, I edit Glenn's stuff all the time, I have to say I did not fully understand. But I believe it has something to do with the fact that instead of one radio sort of doing one stream, there are now sort of an array of 2 radios or 2x2 radios or 2 antennas, and so they can do 2 streams at once and have various fancy technologies, so the 2 streams reflect off of each other or something.
I can speak a little bit to this.
Please do.
Yeah, we don't have Glenn here, so I'm sure I'll get some of this wrong, so sorry, Glenn. But yeah, essentially the way it works is you can have the devices supporting multiple streams. Now, your router also has to support at least as many streams as your device, otherwise you're then limited by the router. So if your router is a 1-stream router, doesn't matter if you've got a 3-stream device, you're operating at 1 stream. So this is a 2-stream, or 2x2, as you said, and that's right. That is what's happening in these new devices. But it's not that it's sending it's sending all of the data over every stream is how it works. Wi-Fi, though, the thing that limits our speed with Wi-Fi, we have this theoretical maximum and then things sort of fall down from there. The thing that limits it is all the retransmissions that need to happen. And so when you've got multiple streams beaming to one device, the chance that the data has made it is either twice or 3 times as great. And so you don't have to do this retransmission, and you can continue streaming data to it or from it. And that's why it gets faster. So it's a really interesting thing. I mean, you can talk to some of these people about Wi-Fi that make this stuff, and it gets really crazy really fast, as I'm sure this discussion just did. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of really deep technology in there. My brother is a chip designer, and he's in a lot of signal processing stuff. And so for this, what they do is it's called beamforming. Is they'll use the multiple antennas so that they'll just slightly modulate it so that they can steer the direction. So that instead of just having to transmit and going everywhere, they'll try to point it at wherever your Mac or your iPad or wherever the device is. And that coupled with, as Dave was saying, that by getting better, point to point, and you don't have packets drop out and have to go back and request them and go through all that latency and delay, that's what contributes to the speed up.
Now, I will say that the faster Wi-Fi speed is actually going to be really attractive to gamers who like to use their iPads to play multiplayer games that require using their Wi-Fi. There's a lot more MMOs that are starting to creep onto iPad and other mobile games and or other mobile devices, and that's going to be a big factor in being able to decide whether to wait for the iPad 4th gen.
Interesting.
I just wanted to add that Glenn also said in plain English that even though Apple said twice as fast, he felt that a real world maximum that you could sort of hope for might be 50% faster.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. That's still a nice little bump.
Oh, definitely.
And in addition to it being faster, as you add more streams, you actually get more reliability out of it. And because you get more reliability, you get better range. So it sort of all factors together that you're going to get better range out of these things because of the extra radio or extra antenna, I should say.
So you'll be able to do your multiplayer gaming while out in the backyard.
Yes, you could get fresh air and have your head totally busy.
Oh, gamers don't want fresh air. That's horrible.
That's poison.
No, son.
Well, how about the Mac Mini? The Mac Mini, that felt like it was a rumor that came late to the table. But Apple, I mean, the one thing that I noticed and was kind of excited about for it, Apple finally will let you crack this thing open without, having to use a Magnum or something to get in and update the RAM. And apparently, it looked like even the hard drive or SSD or whatever was accessible. Dave, is this important?
I think it is. There's a lot of people using Mac Minis as these headless servers and that sort of thing. And let's be honest, anybody that even knows the term headless server, let alone considers using this for one, is going to be a geek at some level, right? You're not at the bottom of the geek totem pole. So you know what I mean? So yeah, I think that is important. I wonder if half the people that buy Mac Minis now, not that own them and have had them for a while, but half the people that buy them now probably have the intention of taking them apart at some point during their useful lifespan to, add RAM or do something else. And so, yeah, this has always been sort of a problem. I bet you could ask Kyle over at iFixit what their most downloaded user guide is, and I bet the Mac Mini tear apart is right near the top of that list. So.
It could be. I've got one. It's about an arm's length and 2 hands away, and I've bought the SSD upgrade kit, and I just haven't had time. I bought it months ago, but it's a great wonderful device. This is the second one I had. I had one from 07, and I upgraded right around this time last year, November, December last year. And, it's great. It's a fast machine.
Well, even at the stock configuration, I mean, this is a nice little machine. If you add a key, all you do is add a keyboard, a mouse, and a display, and I know that sounds like we're shifting back to the PC world, but it feels like this is a very, very affordable Mac. and so many people already have those things that they could drop this in place. They might even be able to replace an iMac if they bought even just a cheap display and have one heck of a nice machine.
No. You go the other direction. Buy a Retina display and power it with a Mac Mini.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to keep the price down, Mark. I'm thinking, the affordability.
Ooh,
Hook their HDTV to it.
Well, right. HDTV, but what?
It has HDMI out, absolutely.
HDMI out. It has. Am I right? 3 USB 3 and 2 display ports.
Okay, so they changed it since mine. I think the new one has. It's either 3 or 4 USB 3, 2 Thunderbolt, HDMI, and a little memory card, and 1 gigabit Ethernet and Wi-Fi.
That's a lot of connectivity.
It is, and imagine the price. $599. For the entry level. Can't be beat. Yep. Anyone who needs a server or anything, that's how I use mine. It's probably the sweet spot in the Apple product line.
Yeah,
it's got 4 USB 3 ports.
4 USB, okay. But everybody says server, and I look at this thing and think, okay, if I don't need a portable machine, for home, I mean this blows a lot of stuff away that is not all that old, even on the Mac line.
So I think I see an iMac behind. Sorry, behind you, Chuck.
It'll smoke that. I mean,
use that and use the remote, the screen sharing connection, and use that, that way if you need a lot of CPU but not so much graphics, that's a great way you harvest more investment out of or more use of the investment you already need, and get a Mac Mini for all your. Actually, for you, for rendering and editing, that might be a great piece of equipment for an upgrade.
Just what I need. Mark helping me spend money. Thanks.
It's funny. I have gone to buy a Mac Mini for the house for one reason or another so many times, and as I start adding it up, I get within about $150 of an iMac, and I just buy an iMac instead. And it has happened. Mm-hmm. I have been. If you had asked me 10 minutes before I made my purchase, what are you buying? I would have sworn it was going to be a Mac Mini, and then it's like, well, but actually, in the refurb store, if I do this, now I'll buy the iMac every time.
Yeah, well, it has a lot of use for home entertainment. I mean, a lot of other people we know, like Adam Christensen, talks about it a lot on his shows, and Katie Floyd, I think, has talked about how she's using it. So, if you do need a headless Mac, or a server. For that, it's really a great piece of gear. If otherwise, I think, as you said, Dave, I'd rather get a MacBook Air or an iMac or something else.
It'll be interesting to see how that does play out, how it's received.
I think the people who have them, love them. I think I'm in that sort of fanatic club. I mean, I think if people who really love them, absolutely love them.
Yeah, well, I have an older one here that really at this point doesn't get as much use as it should, but it's been a terrific little machine, and now there's an even better version. So that brings us. Yeah, it is. Yeah, that brings us to the new iMacs, and I think I'm going to get one because I think I need a shave. It is.
So there's something interesting about that. They sure made it look thin, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's not thin.
Yeah,
the edge is thin. They showed it to you this way. They showed it to you like this, and then suddenly they showed it to you like this.
Yeah.
But you never saw it like this. No, and on the side, it's really thick in the back. It's almost like. It's almost like they took an airport extreme, like the old dome base stations, mm-hmm. and the back of it is shaped like that. I mean, it's got this huge dome on the back. It gets thin at the edge, but not for very long. It goes, it domes way out. Yeah.
So is this like having a Retina, an Apple display with a Mac Mini tacked on back of it?
Yeah, almost. Yeah, and they just made a nice cover for it. Yeah.
Tapered.
Well, what I can't
very well tapered.
What I can't figure out is, I understand it's nice to have a thin monitor as compared to, like an old Mac Plus or something. I mean, it's a thinner monitor for sure, but do I care? I mean, it's sitting on my desk against the wall.
It looks beautiful if you're into that tapered dome look on its side.
Right, but I can't even see my monitor from the side.
Of course not.
Oh, but if somebody walks in and sees your monitor, I mean, they would just be appalled if your monitor wasn't there. See?
I see.
I guess.
You're missing the point of it.
I mean, it's the point that it's like, from a technology standpoint, I mean, they did something really cool. You know, they fused it and they got rid of their air layer and all this stuff. But really, it
doesn't matter.
No.
Yeah, I agree. I think that part was. Yeah, I mean, did you notice just final close on the Mac Mini that when they were going through it, Phil Schiller, when he started talking about the Mac Mini, it seems like he picked up his pace 50%, he just right through it, and at the end, when Tim Cook was recapitulating everything, he forgot the Mac Mini. He listed all the other upgrades and refreshes in 2012. He forgot the Mini. So I think the iMac, it's great that it's thinner and better manufacturing, but like they say, it's a distinction without a difference. I don't think a lot of people really care.
I thought of one difference, which I don't personally care about, but like people who work with lots of different Macs and have to move them around, it's 8 pounds lighter, he said, I believe. And so that does make a difference. Or like if, they have to ship 1,000 of them on a container ship or something, maybe they can,
that's real
get
money.
more on or something.
But I think really the interesting thing about it was their so-called fusion drive, where they're where they're pairing an SSD and a hard drive, and they're doing caching to bring it into the SSD for blazing fast performance.
Yeah, so I got to talk to one of the engineers about that for a while, and I actually put up an article on TMO about this earlier. Caching is only the right term if you're going to forego the common definition of caching. Because caching indicates that the data is duplicated, right? That it is in two places, and it's not.
So tiering.
The data is moved. So if you have a 1 terabyte hard drive and a 128 gig SSD, you actually have a 1.12. The system sees it as 2 drives, and if you run disk utility, you see 2 drives. It's not happening in hardware. It's happening in OS X. OS X fuses them together as one logical drive that it presents to the system. And then it moves data back and forth depending on what it thinks is best based on what you're using. Time Machine backs up one logical volume. If you do lose a disk, if a disk dies, you can actually, in theory, I mean, we haven't tried this, but according to Apple, you could dig in and pull whole files off of one drive or the other. Of course, you're going to be missing the stuff that was on the drive that was lost, but you're not losing. But you're not losing everything, and right, so it's not like RAID. It's a very interesting. It solves that problem of I want an SSD speed, but I don't want to. But I have more stuff than I can afford to buy SSDs for.
Right. I misspoke. I should have used the term tiering because that's what a lot of storage companies are doing. Some of the new Drobo SSD enabled units, a lot of the high end storage by companies like EMC and all the 12 dozen it seems flash SSD companies. They're all using this tiering idea where it's data you need fast is really quick. And then when it's not used anymore, it cools down, it goes back out to disk. The enterprise storage geeks have what they call a tier 0, which is all the stuff that will live in flash. And it's good to see Apple's adopted it, and they're not sitting on their laurels, and they're just continually to, I think people overlook and they think, maybe sometimes Tim Cook is speaking platitudes when he says we're just trying to make the best products possible. But the fact that they've done this, the fact that they've made it thinner, even though it seems a little bit like a joke to the people on this jury. The products are getting better, and they're just relentless at doing that.
Yeah, I'm interested in how that fusion drive is going to impact the actual speed of programs on there. Is it going to, especially if you have a program that relies on the speed of the CPU, is it really going to impact moving that data back and forth? Is it going to slow down the program?
Well, I think from what I understood from talking to them, the one difference that, and it's obvious once you think about it, that they have versus, say, just a drive manufacturer building a closed box that then connects to a machine. drive manufacturer can look at what is commonly used and decide, yes, I'm going to store this on the SSD. Apple knows exactly what, not if how often the file is used, but what it is used for, right? And so, what can throw off a lot of these third-party solutions is when you back up, right? Because you back up, now everything's being read. So, if you're doing a very simple, whatever was read last gets cached thing, you've now moved your cache is a mess because you just backed up your whole drive, right? If you're cloning it every night, you're resetting any learning that your drive has done once per day, and that's not helpful. Whereas Apple knows, look, when Time Machine backs up, ignore the fact that we're reading all these files. Don't use that to calculate whether or not this thing should be stored on the SSD. And
Dave, before
and OS 10 and the apps will know when you open a file, if you're in Aperture, for instance, or maybe Final Cut, it will know that hey, we're going to use this stuff. Let's go get it off the hard drive and bring it into the SSD. I think where you probably really see this benefit is, if it's done intelligently for things like Final Cut, where you have a project file, so you have a lot of different media files. That way, it will be smart enough it can pull everything in. That's going to be a big win. If it's going to be something small, like you're just opening a Pages document or an Excel spreadsheet, it's either on one drive or the other, and it just may, again, it depends what sort of policies they implement there. It may first put it into SSD, and then, sort of like now in Lion and Mountain Lion, they'll lock it after 30 days. They'll have some sort of time period where if it's not used, they'll just give it the boot and move it off to SSD. Sorry, into HDD.
Dave, clarify that for me, though, and because I maybe missed it, and I want to make sure the listeners get it. You say that if I clone my drive every night, I'm resetting the learning? How am I doing that if I'm just cloning it?
Well, when you clone the drive, you're reading every file on the drive once. Okay, and so now if the drive has no idea why it has been read, then it can't make an intelligent decision about whether or not to count that towards, its calculations. And a third part, something, they've got these, all these different drives that have built-in caching using flash storage at different levels. And they just can't, they can't do it. Whereas if the OS is involved, okay, now we can say, hey, ignore this. I'm just backing up. Don't mind me, that kind of thing. And one other thing that I found out is they're using the SSD for all write operations as well. So writes will happen very, very quickly. And then if the data does not need to be on the SSD, it gets offloaded back to the hard drive. So. Right.
Yeah. So I think to go back to what Dave was saying, unfortunately, there's all sorts of backup programs. So a lot of times for cloning, as Tonya knows, who edits all of Joe's books. If you're cloning, you can do that just be really dumb at block level. Just copy the contents of every block out. That takes a long time, and you have to copy everything. If you're a little bit smart about it, like Time Machine or some other things, you can look at the file system and realize, okay, these are 100 files that have changed since it was last run, and then it goes out and gets those, and bam, that will be very, very, very fast in comparison. Unfortunately, depending if you use a file level or a cloning type of approach, that can interact badly with this tiering, where you may fool it into thinking, oh, because you're reading it for backup purpose, that this must be important. Let me bring it back in off a hard drive and back into SSD. So it could get fooled. And again, that's part of the tuning, and we'll see.
No, that's right. Yeah, third-party backup utilities will almost certainly fool this Fusion drive. And Fusion drive will only work on the new iMac, even if you bought an Apple. Apple used to have a build-to-order option with the prior iMac, where you could get an SSD and a hard drive from the factory in the thing. And I think this was probably what tripped Apple to start thinking about what now is Fusion drive. Customers were confused. They had this whole other drive with nothing on it. They didn't know how to deal with it. And but Fusion drive, at least as of today, will not run on anything older than the new iMac.
Yeah, there's a hard risk of being a storage geek. This answers a question I had going back to Lion, where Apple started to introduce a volume manager, and the question was why. So what would they do with this?
Yeah.
Mountain Lion came in, okay, nothing there. It's still something under the covers. Well, now they've played their hand. Now we know what that was for.
Well, it's also for full disk encryption.
Right. Oh, okay. Good point.
Right. I mean, that was really the first place it was used. Yeah.
Okay, and here's the second thing: is there they can pool them and make it look like one volume to the OS, where under the hood, the files are in one or the other location.
Yeah.
Somebody this afternoon, I'd love to give credit, but it went by my Twitter stream so too fast, said that now the things that are powered by a Fusion drive are the USS Enterprise, the Millennium Falcon, and iMacs.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
But did you notice? Did you notice Phil also said as an afterthought that Fusion? Oh, it's also available for the Mac Mini.
No, I missed that.
Yeah, and again, that makes sense, right? It's probably it's a new device and it has the ability to have both SSD and spinning hard drive in it.
Omaha, before we wrap this up, I want to make sure, because I misunderstood your opening comment that this was an important day for gamers. Is the iMac the machine that you think is the gaming machine that everybody's going to want?
Right now. Some of you, I don't know if you were reading some of the live blogging. I was paying attention to some of the live blogging from Macworld and Ars Technica, I think it was. And one of those two mentioned something after the iMac had been introduced and wrapped up. Sorry, no updates about the Mac Pro. To which most Mac gamers were like, no duh, we already knew that. Because earlier this year, Tim Cook had already stated in an email to a gamer who had he replied to that the Mac Pro was going to experience a significant update next year. So in 2013, we're going to see an upgrade to the Mac Pro line. Chances are, it looks like we might be seeing an Apple Fusion drive in that as well now that we've gotten this information. And we're probably going to be seeing some significant upgrades in the graphics card department. I'm going to suspect something in the area of like the GTX 650. But the iMac that was introduced is going to play it's going to play all of the latest Mac games that have been released this year. I'm talking The Witcher 2. Unfortunately, it's not going to play Call of Duty Black Ops, but that has nothing to do with the graphics card and everything to do with the way Aspire ported that game. I'm not going to get into that detail. Batman Arkham City was just announced a few weeks ago. Even the system requirements haven't been released on that, but chances are it's going to be falling within the iMac's graphics card requirements. And this iMac has the core Intel CPU that will deal with it. It has and the interesting thing I found about this iMac is up until now, all of the iMacs for the past 3 years have had ATI Radeon cards, well, AMD now, but Radeon cards ranging from the 4670 line to the 6970 line. And so if you have an iMac that was released last year and possibly the year before, you should be able to play most of those titles that were released last year and some of the titles this year. But if you have an older iMac, you're going to want an upgrade, and this is the perfect machine to upgrade with. However, if you have a Mac Pro and you like Mac Pros, then you have a question to ask yourself. Because if you have a Mac Pro, chances are you're the kind of person who likes to upgrade your own video card, who likes to play around inside your machine. And so you're asked to ask yourself, well, do I want to get an iMac where I can open up the inside of my own machine and do stuff with it? Or do I wait another year or half a year, depending on how long it's going to be before Apple actually releases the upgrade to the Mac Pro line, and wait for my new Mac Pro? Or do I go ahead and bite the bullet and actually get the iMac right now? Of course, there's the third option of trying to enhance the machine you've got right now with an external power supply, and I'm not going to go into that one either. But the fact of the matter is, yes, I'm facing that one right now. But the fact of the matter is those are the two options you've got. The iMac that was announced today, however, is a gaming machine. It will play all of the titles that have been released the past few years, and it will play most of the titles that have been released this past year. And so it is an attractive machine for people who like to game and people who are considering themselves traditional style gamers. It's really a question of whether you have an older or newer machine and whether you want to wait for that Mac Pro line next year or just go ahead and get it now.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the decision we're all having to make, just maybe not about games, but about everything. So I guess gamers aren't that much different than the rest of us.
Yeah.
How fat is the wallet?
Yes. Yep.
Well, guys, I appreciate the time, and I want to make sure that we go around the table one time and just ask for any final comments about anything about today's announcements. Tonya, how about if we start with you?
I guess I want to say that, we can gripe about this or that or comment about this or that question or confusion or failure, but really this is a great time to be an Apple consumer or to be using Apple products. We have absolutely beautiful products to use. I was reflecting that I'm not sad that I bought an iMac really just, like 8 weeks ago, because my iMac that I have does everything I want it to do. I don't have any problem with it being too slow or too icky or too anything. I think that Apple is delivering really nice stuff, and I'm really glad I get to use it.
Great. That's a really good perspective. Mark, how about you?
Well, there's one thing we didn't talk about, the 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that one.
So I think overall, Apple, I think they accomplished the following things today. Number one, significant technology refresh and upgrade, for their installed base. So it's, as we're seeing, and we talked about this on the iPhone show a couple weeks ago, that it seems people are going at the end of a generation, and that's 2 years in a phone, and for a computer, it may be 2, 3, 4 years, depending on what sort of work you do. But clearly, they've made a very attractive desktop in the iMac. The 13-inch MacBook Pro, that's going to be a really sweet machine. I think it's interesting that of all the things announced today, that's the one that's available, starting I think today or starting on Friday. So, I expect there's going to be a run at the stores, for people looking to go and buy that. That's striking at me, but I have to think about it. I have too many Macs. I have to sell some off before I buy that. And then I think what they've done with the iPad Mini is they're just continuing putting more pressure. I think there's maybe a clear price point out there that if money's tight and you're just a $200 or $250 buyer, you go for an Android type of device. If you have a little bit more, step up to $329. That's not all that more than $250 for the Android Nexus. So I think that Apple is slowly marching down the price points, and it's going to make it more tough to compete in the market. And it's really going to be interesting to see what happens later this week with the Microsoft Surface announcement, where we'll finally get some real information. But I think that when that was introduced back in May or June, that was a sort of a Hail Mary pass that Microsoft was doing to their corporate IT. I think Apple's announcements today will go a long way to try to continue to build on their mindshare and bring them back, because I think that's what some of the key points that 100 million sold in 2.5 years, et cetera. He's really driving home the point that hey, you don't need no stinking Windows. You can use this. So, I think overall that Apple is continuing to branch out. And did you note? This is the first time I remember Tim Cook ever saying, he said, again, they're well-known fact that they've outgrown the market, for how many ever years it was. But this is the first time I think I heard him say that we're number one in both desktop. The Mac is number one in both desktop and notebook machines. So, I think again that's just they're continuing to gain ground and gain strength and gain share in the market.
Omaha?
Well, I am actually going to complain about one thing, and that is that I remember the days in the past when Apple events included bringing on developers to talk about some of the things that they have produced for the hardware that Apple had created. And I would really like to see that again because, frankly, I would have liked to have seen some of the games or other, applications that were going to be able to run on the iPad mini, on the iMac, on this MacBook Pro 13-inch, and see the speed that it would have been able to run at, and confirm that it's going to look that awesome. I mean, the adjective machine was running in overdrive, and I kind of got tired of it after about 15 minutes, but to be able to see it, all those adjectives really do nothing more than go into my head. I want to be able to actually experience, to see those applications running on those machines, because that will do much, much more than just having those adjectives running around on the computer screen. So, this is a message sort of to Tim Cook and the rest of Apple. Please, we would love to see the developers come up and talk about some of the applications that they've created for your hardware, because that's what we're getting your hardware for, is to play those games on, to run those applications on. So, yeah, that's what I'd love to see.
Interesting point. Dave?
In sort of the same vein as what Tonya was saying, this now marks the first time that Apple will come out with an iPad that I'm not running to buy. The iPad 4th Gen, obviously, certainly better than any iPad I have, but I don't have a reason to go get this one. Yeah, it's twice as fast. Okay, mine's plenty fast. Well, I mean, and that's what it is like she said about her iMac, and even it's true the iMac that I bought a year ago, it's plenty fast for what I do. It was perfectly fine yesterday. It's still perfectly fine today. I wasn't in the market to upgrade. And so, there's nothing hugely compelling. Does that mean that these products are bad and that they're going to fail? No, of course not. It just means that we're kind of getting back, it seems like we're getting back into this slowly iterative cycle where, you just sort of let things update, and then when you need to buy, you kind of pick the most current one, and then you sort of let the cycle go, and then when you need to buy again, you pick the most current one. And while that's been happening with computers for a long time, we're now seeing it with, certainly even for us geeks now, seeing it with tablets and everything, with the iPad specifically.
And I guess I'll kind of echo the same thing. We all joke about how our equipment now suddenly looks a little bit older and maybe not quite so shiny. But it still does exactly what it did this morning at 10 o'clock.
Right.
If it's adequate for you, great. If you were waiting, go buy. If you are not satisfied with the performance of your current hardware, go buy. But otherwise, just make the intelligent decision. Don't let these release cycles dictate your buying cycle. Buy when you need it, and if it happens that you miss one of the cycles, so what? So what?
I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for the mini iPad and the MacBook Pro 13.
Yes,
yeah.
indeed.
Yeah, especially, you mean the one we forgot, Dave?
There was such a wealth of products. One just slipped by.
Yeah, maybe.
I got to that thing this morning expecting it was going to be a cream puff event. I'd be there maybe 50 minutes. They'd talk about the iPad mini, tell me some numbers, and then I could go home. And as soon as he said, we're going to start with the Mac, I had this feeling of dread wash over me. No.
I was like, yay!
Yeah, right. Yeah, it depends on, it's all perspective. That's right.
Yeah. I think their teaser, we have something small to tell you, or whatever their line
a little something,
was.
yeah.
A little something. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole theme tonight, right? Everything is smaller, thinner, lighter, and more powerful.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Omaha Sternberg, Tonya Engst, Mark Fuccio, Dave Hamilton, thank you so much for serving on this edition of the MacJury. We will do it again soon. And Dave, happy anniversary.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Chuck.
Folks, I'll have links in the show notes to everything that our panelists do. I would encourage you to go and check them all out because they are all absolutely worth paying attention to, and you got a good dose of that here today. Until the next time, the verdict is in. I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. MacVoicesTV is part of the MacVoices Group at MacVoicesGroup.com. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com.